Hello, legendary investigators. Today we continue with our Cthulhu series. The case we're about to uncover involves a secret the British establishment has hidden for over 100 years. The investigation was not only a matter of life and death, but the final twist was completely unexpected. The story begins in a forest in Western Ireland. This location isn't marked on any map, but a tourist stumbled into it by accident. He moved quickly through the forest, occasionally looking up at the sun and repeating to himself, "Only 22 minutes left." But after a short while, the man suddenly stopped. The starting signpost had appeared again, meaning he had been walking in circles. He cursed, "Damn it!" By this point, his watch's countdown had ended, and the sun above had vanished completely. The next second, a swarm of crows descended. The man looked around in a panic. Something seemed to be approaching from the darkness. He immediately scrambled up a tree to hide. But just as he got halfway up, a branch suddenly snapped, and he fell. The man survived by a stroke of luck, but he had completely lost the ability to move. Just then, a dark figure slowly approached, but when the man saw its face, his first reaction wasn't fear. It was a look of disbelief. A short time later, a pet store employee named Mina received a job. Her boss needed her to deliver a parrot to a zoo in Western Ireland. Although the location was very remote, Mina had always been a free spirit, so she actually enjoyed the journey. After filling up her tank midway, she continued on her way. A notice on the wall flashed by. If we pause, we can see that it's covered in missing persons posters. It seems like the tourist from the beginning. There were at least dozens of unlucky people who went missing in the forest. One of them even looked a lot like a character named Cook. After a full day of travel, Mina entered the vast primeval forest. She only needed to drive another 100 kilometers to reach the zoo. But just then, her phone's navigation started to glitch. Soon after, Mina, as expected, encountered the classic horror movie trifecta: no signal, a broken-down car, and being all alone. Mina got out of the car and noticed that at some point, the once dense forest had a conspicuous highway sign. Mina didn't understand what critical point meant. Her car's engine had broken down. The only solution she could think of was to go check if there were any local residents nearby. But after walking just a few dozen meters, Mina felt as if something was watching her. Perhaps hiding back in the car was the wisest choice. But when she turned her head, she found that the sight behind her had changed. Mina immediately turned back, but after searching for a long time, she still found nothing. She realized she hadn't gotten lost. Her car had literally vanished into thin air. By this time, the sun had also completely disappeared below the horizon. Flocks of crows appeared on schedule, circling endlessly above the forest. Before Mina could figure out what was happening, the ground began to tremble violently. Immediately after, roars could be heard from a distance. Just as she stood there, lost, a dark figure suddenly flashed by. Mina felt like she had found a lifeline and immediately chased after it. A short time later, a building appeared before her, and the dark figure slowly opened the door. Before the countdown ended, Mina successfully ran into the shelter, and the woman quickly locked the door securely. Only after she calmed down did Mina realize there were two other people in the room. The woman introduced herself kindly. They were Madeline, Ciara, and Daniel. Before Mina could fully understand the situation, Ciara quickly helped her up from the floor and told her to stand in a line and not move. Mina noticed that there was a huge mirror on the wall in front of them. They couldn't see outside, but from the outside, you could see in. Madeline explained that a group of creatures called the Watchers would observe the four of them from the other side of the mirror. They appeared every day after sunset, but they wouldn't break in and harm them. Just then, Ciara pushed Mina out as if introducing the newcomer to the Watchers. A few seconds later, enthusiastic applause came from outside, as if they were genuinely welcoming Mina's arrival. And so, Mina sat quietly in the room all night. But the moment morning came, she was eager to leave. Madeline and the others didn't stop her. Mina walked in the forest for a long time and quickly realized that people who entered this place would get stuck in a loop, constantly walking in circles in the same area. Just then, Madeline appeared behind her. It turned out they hadn't wanted to run away, but had tried many times and failed. It was said that the forest had a magic that would slowly drive people mad. To survive, they had to learn some techniques. Madeline told Mina that someone had placed many signposts in the forest with the shelter as the center. As long as they stayed within this range, they could return to the shelter before dark. As the sun set, the group stood in front of the mirror again. This time, Daniel performed a skit, and Ciara did a ballet dance, seemingly to let the Watchers see their unique traits more clearly. Mina had no special skills, so she could only sit quietly on the sofa. The next day, the four of them went out to search for supplies. Ciara took the opportunity to tell Mina about the situation here. Actually, there used to be 4 people in the shelter. But 6 days ago, her husband John went out to find a way out and never appeared again. It seemed that the man from the beginning was Kiara's husband. Next, Kiara explained to Mina the rules they had to follow to survive. 1. Do not turn your back to the mirror. 2. Do not open the door after dark. 3. Do not approach the hole. 4. You must stay in the sunlight. According to the information they had gathered, as long as they didn't break these rules, the Watchers would let them live. Judging from the solemn expressions of the three, it seemed like this was genuinely the case. However, Mina, who had never seen the Watchers with her own eyes, began to doubt whether they truly existed. And her biggest hobby was not following rules. When she was a child, her mother took Mina and her sister out. She told them not to open the window because the wind might mess up their hair and block her view while driving. But Mina had to open it. Because of Mina's actions, her mother died in the garage. It was this event that led her to develop a reclusive personality. Although Mina felt very guilty, her habit of not following rules never changed. When she went to bed that night, she turned over and faced away from the mirror. Immediately, there was a fierce pounding from outside. Fortunately, Madeline discovered it in time and told her to face the mirror and stay still. This successfully placated the Watchers. But the next day, when Mina went hunting with Daniel, she learned he had lived here for 8 months and had never seen a Watcher either. This made her even more suspicious that this was a lie made up by Madeline. She decided to break a rule and enter the hole to see what was inside. With Daniel's help, Mina successfully entered the depths of the hole. To her surprise, it contained many items used by humans. Not just cameras, but even a perfectly intact bicycle. Mina planned to take all these things back. But just as Daniel was pulling the bike up with a rope, a heavy thumping sound suddenly came from the depths of the hole. Fortunately, Mina was standing in the sunlight. The Watcher seemed to fear the sun's burning touch, so it didn't attack her. After taking the bicycle back, Mina explained her idea. Madeline had said before that it was impossible to leave the forest on foot, but with a bicycle, it would be different. Looking at the things on the ground, Madeline realized that Mina must have been up to something behind their backs again. Daniel then converted the camera into a monitor so they could see the outside from inside the shelter. As night fell again, the four of them sat at the table, secretly watching the footage from the camera. But strangely, the Watchers didn't appear on time today. Instead, a knocking sound came from outside the shelter door. From the screen, it seemed a person was standing outside. Madeline told everyone to stay put, then continued to question Mina about where she got the bicycle. Just then, Sierra suddenly stood up excitedly because she heard that the person knocking outside was her husband, John. The person outside kept pleading. Sierra wanted to open the door, but Madeline blocked her path firmly. According to the rules, they absolutely could not open the door after dark. This could be a trick by the Watchers. However, Sierra became more and more agitated. She couldn't just stand by and watch her husband die outside. Daniel also stood up and supported Kiara's decision to open the door and save him. Madeline didn't continue the argument. Instead, he questioned Mina about where she had been. Mina finally told the truth, admitting that she had entered the hole with Daniel's help and brought the bicycle up from down there. When Madeline heard this, he immediately had an answer. He told Sierra not to rush, and instead to ask John outside a secret only they, as a couple, would know. Sierra, half believing, did so. To her surprise, the person outside couldn't answer. This confirmed Madeline's suspicion. The thing outside was definitely not John, and it might not even be human, because the Watchers wouldn't allow anyone to be active outside. But Sierra wasn't giving up. She asked the man to stand in front of the camera so they could see his face clearly. Then, under the gaze of the four, the man slowly leaned in toward the camera. The data connection suddenly snapped. The Watchers were back. The four of them, with no time to argue, quickly stood in front of the mirror. But this time, the Watchers seemed especially furious. They pounded on the mirror wildly, looking as if they were about to break in. It wasn't until Madeline shielded the three of them that the pounding outside gradually subsided. The next day, Madeline threw the bicycle back into the hole and warned the three of them not to act on their own again. After the scare last night, Mina was quiet for a while. But just then, Madeline's eyes suddenly closed. Then, Madeline's cries for help came from outside. Mina and Sierra quickly ran out and found that Daniel had tied Madeline up. Daniel's sudden madness was likely influenced by Mina. Coupled with the long-term dominance of unknown fear, Daniel had begun to doubt the so-called rules. At the same time, Madeline's heartlessness from the night before made him angry. So when Mina and Kira returned to the shelter, they found the door was locked. Daniel actually wanted to test if they could survive outside. By this time, the sun had completely set. Madeline didn't continue knocking on the door, but took Mina to hide under a large tree. The rotten trunk could cover their scent. The next second, a Watcher slowly approached. It did not discover the two people hiding below. Mina also finally witnessed their existence with her own eyes. It was a tall, slender, emaciated humanoid creature. As it let out a strange cry, more watchers quickly arrived. They stood in front of the mirror as usual to observe, but found that only 2 people were inside. After the watchers left, Mina and Madeline returned to the door and begged Daniel to let them in. Seeing that he was unmoved, Mina told him the story of her mother and her. It was the most regretful thing in her life, so she hoped Daniel would not make a wrong decision, or the guilt would haunt him for a lifetime. Moved by Mina's heartfelt words, Daniel finally opened the door. After entering the shelter, Madeline told everyone to quickly stand in front of the mirror, hoping to appease the watcher's anger. While they waited, he revealed some secrets he had never told before. Madeline was actually a history teacher. He learned about the existence of the watchers from ancient books, so he came here voluntarily. While returning to the shelter from a hunt, Madeline accidentally saw the true face of a watcher. He discovered that this creature had replicated his appearance, though the imitation was not perfect. The watchers were an ancient species. They had many different names, but the most well-known was fairies. The reason the watchers allowed them to live was to perfect their replication abilities through close observation. At this moment, the watchers, who hadn't found anyone, returned. Because the 4 of them had broken too many rules, just standing in front of the mirror was no longer enough. The watchers began to pound on the door violently, clearly wanting to replace this unruly batch of playthings. The 4 quickly used a table to barricade the door, but it wouldn't hold for long. Just then, Mina discovered a secret door hidden under the table. Although they didn't know if it was safe below, the watchers' attacks were getting more intense, so they had to risk going down to hide. As Madeline was the last to climb in, the shelter door was finally breached. The group in the basement found that there was a large amount of food stored there. Even if they didn't go out to hunt, there was enough for them to survive for several years. From the various reports on the walls, it seemed someone was here studying the watchers. Mina opened a computer and saw that it contained complete video logs. The numbered folders showed that this person had lived here for at least a year. Mina opened the video for the first day. A bearded man appeared on screen. He introduced himself as Professor Martin and said he had come here as early as 2009. Chiara immediately realized that the signposts outside were set up by him and that the entire shelter was also built by him. As Mina opened the remaining video logs one by one, they discovered a cruel truth behind the professor's research. To make the machinery work, the professor would hire 13 poor people from a nearby town at a high price to build the shelter, because at the end of each day's work, the professor would let these people go out to eat, while he would hide in the shelter until the screams outside gradually subsided. Soon after, the professor accidentally discovered a special watcher. It acted alone in the form of a child and had a more powerful replication ability than the other watchers. The professor hoped to obtain this incredible power from it. He then began to breed this watcher in captivity. The professor's insane research process quickly became too much for Daniel and Kira to bear. Mina simply skipped the earlier files and opened the video log for the last day. The professor looked much older than before. After what happened in between, he planned to end his research and kill the watcher he was keeping. Before the video ended, he left instructions on how to leave the forest. Find signpost number 134, and you can follow the bird to leave the forest. At the end of the video, the professor wrote that after they got out, they must go back to his school and destroy all the research materials he left there. Some things should not be known to the world. With that, the professor disappeared from the screen. Having learned the way to escape, the 4 of them left the basement early the next morning to find signpost 1134. Before they set out, Madeline warned the 3 that the forest would definitely try to stop them from leaving. To avoid being confused by illusions, they absolutely must not split up. This action was definitely a breath of fresh air in a horror movie. The 4 of them found signpost 134 without any mishaps. At this point, Mina released the parrot's smoke. She never expected that bringing it along would become their lifeline to escape. Guided by the smoke, they hurried toward the exit. Along the way, they saw many stone tablets carved with wrinkles. These must have been seals to block the watchers. Madeline told the 3 that fairies, as they were called, once coexisted peacefully with humans. The 2 species could even have offspring together. But one day, the situation suddenly changed, and the problem was with the fairies' abilities. They could replicate human appearances. If it were just ordinary people, it would have been fine. But when some world leaders started to be replicated, humans realized how dangerous this species was. So a great war broke out between the 2 sides. In the end, humans tore off the fairies' wings and sealed them deep underground in the forest. Without their wings and magic, the fairies could no longer escape from here. The 4 of them kept speeding up, but even after dark, the exit still hadn't appeared. Flocks of crows circled above the forest, meaning the sunlight could no longer stop the watchers. They would soon be catching up. Encouraged by Madeline, the four did not give up. They ran with all their might in the direction of the parrot. In the next second, the scene before them suddenly opened up. They had really escaped the forest. The professor's boat was not far away. There was only one step left to freedom. But just then, Daniel suddenly heard a cry for help from behind. John's figure vaguely appeared in the distance. By this time, the other three had already pushed the boat into the water, but they found that Daniel was still on the shore, preparing to save John. But Chiara had already realized that her husband was actually long dead. The John in front of them was just a creature replicated by a watcher. Because the watchers couldn't swim, they could only execute Daniel under the gaze of the three to vent their anger. Afterwards, the John figure changed again and transformed into Daniel's appearance. And more Daniels walked out of the forest. After a year of observation, their imitation was very similar. The next morning, Mina woke up on the boat. A bus passing over the bridge proved they had really returned to the human world. The three of them then took the bus and went their separate ways. Mina, according to the professor's wishes, went to his school office to destroy all the data about the Watchers. The contents were not much different from what the professor had said. But as Mina was organizing the photos, she was so shocked by the person next to the professor that she couldn't speak. She then rushed to Chiara's house overnight. The professor's wife looked exactly like Madeline. According to Mina's investigation, the professor's wife had died a long time ago. So the only explanation was that Madeline was also a Watcher. The two of them had helped him escape from the seal. Mina began to discuss a plan with Chiara, preparing to find a way to send Madeline back. But just then, another Chiara appeared outside the door. Mina's blood ran cold because this meant that the Chiara in the room was likely Madeline in disguise. He had planned to kill them both long ago. Mina tried to escape, but she was no match for the Watcher. Madeline thanked Mina very much. It was because of her unexpected entry that he found a way to escape. While speaking, Madeline transformed into Mina. He would now use Mina's identity to take revenge on humanity. Just as Madeline was about to kill her, Mina used her unbeatable verbal judo. "Mina, stop. We are no longer alone." Madeline let out a mournful cry and grew a pair of wings from his back. He listened to Mina's advice and prepared to go find his own kind. Then he disappeared into the forest. After this event, Mina finally overcame her emotional blockage and stepped out of her childhood trauma. She took the initiative to contact her twin sister and return to her family. But inadvertently, Mina could always faintly feel that Madeline was silently watching her from within the crowd. The Watchers is a movie with a Cthulhu-esque style. The setting of humans and fairies interbreeding is actually very similar to the saga of the Saints. The overall narrative of the movie is complete, but there are some plot holes. I have made some simple additions. In addition, what happened to the professor in the basement also needs to be organized and explained. First, the reason the professor said Madeline was special is that he was a hybrid of human and fairy. Therefore, he wasn't afraid of the sun and had a more outstanding replication ability. But because of this, Madeline was ostracized by the fairies and lived alone, which led to him being captured by the professor and held captive. This also explains why it was effective when Madeline shielded the three of them when the fairies were about to break into the shelter. He was a double agent, on one hand helping lost people survive, and on the other hand, helping the fairies observe humans. So he had influence on both sides. As for what happened after the professor held Madeline captive, it's not difficult to guess. He showed Madeline photos and videos of his wife, and had him replicate his wife's appearance, attempting to use this method to bring his wife back to life through Madeline. In the early stages of the experiment, the professor was very excited, thinking his wife had really returned. So he began to live with Madeline like a normal couple. But after a short time, the professor realized that Madeline only looked like his wife. Resurrection was just a delusion. Living with a monster made the professor, who was used to killing, feel like he had become a pervert. So he decided to kill Madeline and then commit suicide. He never expected to fail and be killed by Madeline instead. After that, Madeline stayed in the shelter to wait for other intruders to help him find a way to escape the forest. From this experience, Mina's final speech was not really a victory. As a hybrid caught between humans and fairies, Madeline was an outcast. His repeated protection of Mina and the others was not just about escaping. He was also searching for a miracle of survival in the cracks between two worlds.